work, one whole day to play. Come on, everybody, wear your roller skates today. It's Saturday, 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 it's Saturday, Saturday, it's Saturday, Saturday, it's Saturday,
Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Career Exploration Saturday. I'm your host, Ebony Tyler. I have real conversations with real people about real jobs. This week, my guest is Tandalea Mercer. This was a delightful conversation, catching up with an old friend. We talk about things Black people do, HBCUs, and code switching. All right, let's jump right in. Good afternoon. Welcome, Tandalea. Welcome to Career Exploration Saturday. I am so glad to have you here today.
Oh, thank you. Good to be here, Eb. It's good to see you. Haven't seen you in a long time. Well, I've seen you on Instagram, but haven't seen you. We don't. Nobody's seeing anybody really. I think. Well, now things are opening up, right? People are seeing things and seeing people. But yeah, good to see you. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So, Tandalea, I want to tell this quick story, right? So, Tandalea was referred to me by another person who's going to be on the show shortly, Rosnell. And Rosnell's like, I have a friend. She's an actress. She was in law school. Like, he was just talking you up. And then he was like, her name is Tandalea. We went to Del State. I was like, in my head, I was like, Tandalea Mercer.
You only know like one Tandalea, right?
Right. And then he says your name and he goes to your phone. And then I said, is her last name Mercer? He was like, yes. I said, I know her. How you know her? I said,
he doesn't want anybody to know me except him. Such a Scorpio. I saw territorial.
I said, we went to Bible camp together. That was in the 80s.
Was it Pine Bush? Pine Bush Bible Camp?
Pine Bush Bible Camp.
Yes, sure was. Shout out to Pine Bush for cultivating lifelong relationships. I'm still friends with people from Pine Bush and Camp Comanche. And Camp Comanche was another like I don't know, kind of Christian-esque camp. Yes, it's exactly what it was. I don't know what that was. I don't know if it was like all the kids in Brooklyn that, you know what I mean? They mama just had the pamphlet and just was like, let's send their asses on to a Bible camp. That's crazy.
Listen, folks, for real. I mean, folks, listen. Black kids go to sleepaway camp, and we love it.
Okay, wait a minute. Black kids go to sleepaway camp. We go to day camp. Listen, there's a lot of things that Black families do, which we need to talk about, because there's a lot of things that Black families do that people don't think that we do. First of all, by nature, Black people are a communal people. Let's talk about it. Black people by nature are communal people. It's in our DNA. It's in our DNA. It's how we were. Let me say something. I bet you all the kids in the back in the day, I don't know what it looked like now, but because I don't have children, but somebody's mama used to look out for somebody else's kid all the time and would let your mama know, oh, such and such is out there acting crazy, such and such is out there being fast, such and such is out there being cute. And so Black people by nature, we are very communal, and before we were, taken on slave ships and brought across the Atlantic Ocean to the New World, we live very much communally and very much in a community-oriented spaces. Hence why today we have what we have in different parts of different communities. We have ethnic enclaves. And if you see where different people sort of congregate and live, you've got your people, well, I know here in LA, even though I'm a New Yorker, even in Brooklyn, you've got heavy Caribbean influence in Flatbush and East Flatbush, right? And so in certain parts of Brooklyn, you got heavy Russian in like Sheepshead Bay and all of that, heavy Russian Jew. Then you got your Jews that live in certain parts of Crown Heights and certain parts of Ditmas Park and Bensonhurst. So, then you've got your heavy Italian in like Howard Beach. And so people from different groups, and people think that Black people don't have culture. We have rich culture. So yes, we're very communal. Yes.
Now,
I'm sorry. I get in these lessons. You know what I mean? That's the professor in me.
I can't wait to hear about you being a professor. So tell us what 15-year-old Tandalea was like in Brooklyn.
Well, 15-year-old, I wasn't actually in Brooklyn anymore at that point. I had moved to Queens. So like many Black families, there had been issues with drugs and alcohol in our family, and it caused me to have to go and live in Queens. And I hated Queens. I hated Queens. No disrespect to Queens. I love my Q borough, my folks in the QB, but I'm not a Queens girl. I've never been a Queens girl. I lived in Queens and I went to high school in Queens. But I absolutely loathe living in Queens. But I think I think it saved my life to some degree, right? There were things that happened in Queens that, gave me different opportunities than what I would have had I been still living in Brooklyn. Um, I don't know. Then again, I would never have known that, right? But my Brooklyn self in Queens I always felt like an outsider all the time because I would always go back to Queens because that's where my dad lived. That's where all my grandparents lived. That's where everybody was except my aunt that I was living with in Queens. And I had a ton of family in Queens, a ton, but I wasn't close with that family. So, we don't get me wrong. I did see that family. We weren't close like the family I had in Brooklyn. So my 15-year-old self felt very I always felt like a fish out of water in Queens, always. And I always said, as soon as I would be able to, I'm leaving. I'm either going to go away to school or I'm going to go back to Brooklyn and I'm going to live the life that I want to live. And I'm born and raised in Brooklyn, you know what I mean? For the most part, right? And so born in Fort Greene, Clinton Hill, and there's no place in the world like Brooklyn at all. There's no place in the world. So even with all the gentrification today, I still, missed that part of my life. And I felt like I didn't have freedom in Queens, and I felt like I didn't have opportunities in Queens, but there were opportunities for me in Queens. And so when I lived there, I went to a very, 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 very diverse school. I was a cheerleader, I was in dance, and I even ran track a little bit. And so there were things in Queens that kept me, very, very focused. And I was like a A- B+ student, but I've always been a good student, right? But I think the school that I went to kept me very focused on that. And my love of dance kept me focused on artsy things and being very creative. And so, yeah, I think Queens gave me opportunities that I'm not sure I would have been able to really take advantage of if had I been in Brooklyn as a adolescent.
So you said you wanted to escape Queens, and it would be through college. Was that your escape to?
Well, so that's weird, right? So I had the opportunity to graduate high school early, a little nerdy, but still pretty popular. But I took that opportunity. I still walked right in June, but I had an opportunity to get out of high school a little early, and so I did this like bridge program where because I was a cheerleader and I was a cheerleading captain, and so went to a local college. I don't know if I should say the name of the school. I don't know if that's a group that's allowed, but
No, no, it is. You
right
can
up
if
the
you want.
street, went to St. John's and cheerleaded there, but also was, in school. And I was like, I'm not staying in Queens. This is not what I'm doing. I don't want this. So I I was like, no. So I finished out, I finished out school and I walked and I did everything. And about 2 years prior, was it 2 years or maybe a year prior, I had gone on a couple of college tours. I went on 2 college tours. One, I went on a college tour with Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Shout out to my Delta girls. I'm not a Delta, but I did go on a college tour with the Deltas, the Queens Alumni Chapter, and it was everything I needed. Like it was everything I needed to remind me that Black excellence existed forever. And I learned these things in home, right? I'm grateful that I had family that taught me about heritage and culture and Black people and what all of that. So I'm grateful. And so there's something to be said about learning, get your lessons at home first. There's something to be said about getting what you got to get from home, right? Before you go out in the world. And I learned this as a professor, that there's a lot of things that people don't know from home And so I find myself now being that person that gives these lessons to my students. And we're talking about grown people in college that certain things they never learned, never heard of, never was taught about. So so when I so for me, um getting I have to get back on track because it's like I got 10,000 things going on in my mind about how I want to answer that, how I want to go about sharing this. So I went on this college tour and visited all of these colleges from the South down. So from Delaware State all the way down to we went to North Carolina, I think South Carolina. We went to so many schools, Hampton and Howard and South Carolina State and St. Augustine's and Shaw and Morgan State, Bowie State, Coppin State. I mean, we went to, I don't know, maybe 12 colleges, all Black excellence, all. And when I got to Delaware State University, first of all, I didn't want to be too far from my brothers because I have brothers that like were like, I literally like cared for them. I was like a second mom to my brothers. My brothers and I were really close. And so when I got to Del State, I'll forget the guy's name, but he was the director of admissions at the time. This funny older Black man who just had us in just cracking up. And he said, I will give you guys admission right here on the spot. He was like, all you have to do is fill out an application. He said, waive the application fees. And at the time he said Delaware State University is $8,888. I don't know if he said it was per year or per semester. And I don't know why that's just stayed with me. But then I thought about it and I was just like, this is not too far because I was like, well, I'm going to go to Howard. But when I visited Howard, it was in the middle of the hood. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I was like, oh, I don't know about this. Now, don't get me wrong. I still had my heart set on Howard. But when I looked, because at that time, the two biggest Black colleges I knew about were Howard and Hampton. Hampton, actually, and Spelman and Morehouse. Those are like the big ones. But I already knew I never wanted to live in Georgia. I was like, there's no way. Like, I never would survive down there. I would never make it. And Hampton, I felt like, oh my God, that trip when we were driving, I was like, oh my God, this is so far. This is so long. Oh my God. And when I got to DC, I loved Howard, but then I was like, this is hood. Like, we in the hood. Like, we went across the street and was at the spot that sold, what do they call it? The chicken wings and the mambo sauce. And I was like, this is some ghetto stuff. So I said, oh, I don't know if I'm comfortable living in another hood that I'm not, listen, we could go to the hood and live in any hood, right? But I think we need to be familiar with all the things in different hoods. Like, I'm not going to go to Compton. I'm not going to live in Compton because I'm not familiar with that kind of hood. I talk about the hoods in New York City. Let me go ahead and move to any of the hoods in New York City because I know what I'm dealing with. You don't know all the hoods everywhere, right? Not all hoods are created equal. When I say hood, I mean like hood. I'm not talking about neighborhood. I'm talking about like barrio. I'm talking about like hood. So I was just like, yeah, it really gave me pause on Hampton.
Yeah.
So I decided to go to Delaware State University. And it was a tough summer that summer before I got there. I did all of my packing by myself and I, went all over the place and bought all these things because I didn't know what I would need. And nobody helped me figure it out. I literally figured it out. I figured it out. I mean, my grandmother dropped a couple things in my ear. Oh, make sure you buy this, toiletries, that, this, and that. And literally, I had no idea what I was in for. So I bought like bins, those plastic bins. I bought bins of stuff and I packed everything that I owned. And I remember those like expandable luggages, not like the expandable ones we have now, but like they expand upward. And like, they were like so cheap. You could buy them off like Flatbush Avenue or like Jamaica Avenue. I bought like 2 of those. And because I had a little job and all my little savings, like I just bought all the things that I thought that I would need. And I asked my uncle to buy me a crock pot because I heard through the grapevine that if you get you a crock pot, that's what you would need in your dorm room. And I went off to school. My father rented a car and he drove me to Delaware and dropped me off and was just like, good luck. And I was just like, holy shit, here it goes.
Well,
So,
listen, I'm not gonna hold it against you that you went to Dell State because I went to
hold it against me.
because I mean, I was an hour away at UMES, so and Dell State got and
Yes,
Dell State has
sure, yes, come on, HBCU. Because the other one, College Park, is not an HBCU,
it
which
is
is which
it
is
is not.
which is crazy to me. It's like literally, literally. But yes,
Yeah.
yes, come through.
But I felt the exact same way about Howard. Loved it, but I was like, this where it's at is not for me. I mean, like, let's talk about. Well, we don't gotta bash Howard, but Howard, y'all was not the place to be in the '90s. So all of you who graduated and went to Howard in the '90s, y'all different kind of black than me because I wasn't about it either.
Couldn't even understand. I was just like, I'm a little scared. I'm a little scared. It was take a lot to scare me because I lived in the projects in Coney Island, and I've been around the gunshot but that was just like,
Right.
So
All right. So you graduated Dell State, right? You got a bachelor's degree in political science. Like, tell us about your time at Dell State.
Well, actually, I have 2 degrees from Dell State, so I have 2 bachelor's degrees, so I double major. And it was a conflict, right? Because when you have, family you have, and you're the first grandchild, and everybody's expecting you to be a certain something, and immigrant grandparents, like, so it's one of those things where it's just like, okay, great, wait, what do you do? And I always excelled in like history and in social sciences and social studies. Well, I guess in high school we called it social studies, right?
Yeah.
And then I always excelled in the arts, right? I was very artsy and dancey and, did, acting and dance and all these things like extracurricular type things. So I had a love for both of them. And I was always told like, yeah, that's great, but dance is not going to, it's not going to take you where you need to go. Cause and here's where I feel like there's a falsehood, right? We're taught at a very early age, oh, you got to get an education, you got to go to college, but nobody tells you that you go and you put yourself in all of this debt because Black people aren't extended the same types of, not all Black people, many Black people, let me say this, have not been extended the same amount of, what's that, wealth that we're able to go off to school and just pay for it straight out by ourselves. And I'm still experiencing that today. I'm a grown ass woman, okay? So we are taught very, very early, education is the key. Education, nobody can take your education away from you. And that is true without a shadow of a doubt. But we are taught to stay in this perpetual circle or cycle of debt and of lack of knowledge and financial literal understanding. And so I went off to college and was like, well, if I get these degrees, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna go to law school and I'm gonna go do this and I'm gonna do that. I wanted to work at the UN. I was like, I'm gonna work in this government and I'm gonna do that and I'm gonna do that. I had all these things because the creative side of myself I had to suppress because I was always told you can't make no money doing it. Can't make no money doing it. You can't do that. So I had to suppress that, but I still went to college and gave my artsy self, and I never realized it at the time. I needed that outlet, and so the English degree gave me all of that. It gave me all of the things that I needed to know about, classical theater and African American literature and African American theater, and all of these things that it opened my whole head up. And the beautiful thing about going to a Black college is that there's a level of double consciousness that is very, very different than the double consciousness that you have to have when you go out in the world and work in corporate America. And anybody doesn't know what double consciousness is, look up W.E.B. Du Bois. So it's literally code switching. It's literally having two minds, right? I think at a Black college, the two minds you actually need to have are, I'm Black and I'm blacker than Black. Like it's not a I'm Black and I need to act like this kind of Black in the white workplace. And although that's kind of changing now with diversity, equity, and inclusion, which we'll talk about when we get there, but there's no code switching needed at a Black college. No code switching needed because you are surrounded by everybody from across the diaspora. So I'm talking about from Africa to the Caribbean to South America to the New World, which is here, right, in North America. And everybody is a shade of melanin, but everybody comes from somewhere different. And that's the beauty of it. So there wasn't a need for that. So when you get there, you don't realize that people are in the same financial situation you're in. They're in the same
Mm-hmm.
boat you're in. And I decided Delaware State University. So I have 2 degrees from Delaware State. I have a bachelor's degree in political science and I have a bachelor's degree in English. And so I fed both parts of my life very, very early, my creative and my corporate side very early. And and that's what I wanted. And I'm so grateful for that. And then try to do the law school thing. And I was like, this is not gonna work for me. It's not gonna
So,
work for me.
so you describe yourself as a law school dropout, a proud law school dropout.
I
So,
am
so,
I
so how long did it take you to realize this ain't it?
the semester, the
Oh,
first year, the,
okay.
that first semester, I was like, this ain't gonna work for me. First of all, I went to a law school that there weren't that many people that looked like me. And I
Yeah.
chose this law school. Let me tell you why I chose this law school. First of all, it was one of the few that I got accepted to. Law school is very, very difficult to get into. Was one of the first ones I got accepted to. I wanted to go to American, and I was on the waiting list, or Columbia, and I was on the waiting list. And I even applied to Fordham Law. And let me tell you something. I was so upset that I didn't get into any of those. So I begrudgingly decided this school. And the reason, let me tell you the reason why, it was such a petty reason. So like those Gallup polls, and it says according to such and such law school or such and such university. And I remembered seeing that name on so many like polls. And I said, well, I wonder if I go to a school like that, will it really like make a difference? Will it
Mm.
really like, since people that not all people know what that school is or where that school is and whatever. So I chose it. And when I got there, I had no support. When I say I had no
Mm.
support, every one in every 50 people was Black. And that was very few. It was in a very, very white town. And I felt like I'm going to drown here by myself. This Black girl is going to drown in a sea of all of these white folks. And I would go to my, I would go to my advisor. You do get an advisor because it's very important, especially as a first year law student. And you've got all of these things you need to keep up. You can get through the first year law school. They say you can get through law school, right? But then you got to pass the bar. And when I was there, I had nobody that looked like me. And even my advisor wasn't the most encouraging person. He was a white man. And, he would say things to me like, you have to decide if this is something that you want to do for, if this is something that's going to impact your life in a way. And it was never positive things. No, don't get me wrong. What maybe just saying that sounded like it was positive, but the delivery wasn't
Right,
positive.
right, 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 right.
I'm saying it in a much nicer way. And I felt like I'm gonna die here. Like I felt alone. I felt unsupported, and I was like, this is not gonna work for me.
So, I mean, I wouldn't say it was a dropout. It sounds to me like you saved yourself.
You know what? I saved myself. That might be the best way to describe that. Because you know what? We don't save ourselves in many situations. We go into things and they're toxic. And that would have been a toxic ass situation had I stayed. I would have threw out all that money and would have never really reaped a benefit from it. So I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good. I went on to grad school, went to the New School University, right in the city, right in New York City. Shout out to the New School, one of the best schools for social and liberal and justice and policy and all that stuff in America. And I was excited. I chose the New School over NYU, and it was one of the best experiences of my life. Graduate school was one of the best experiences of my life. I got to travel. I got to meet so many amazing people. I got to meet so many people that for the first time in my life, I understood what an ally was.
Mm.
Real people that did not look like me, that really was about this life, like about it. Like, oh, word, let's go protest today. And hold on, wait, I just got here. Hold on. So I think that lit an additional kind of fire inside of me, a fire that I had already had burning going to a Black college, but
Mm.
a very socially liberal graduate school.
Yeah.
I didn't even know. I was not prepared. But then speaking of prepared, I actually wasn't prepared, at least academically, where I don't think that I got what I got from my Black college. There was a lot of things that didn't serve me in grad school, and not in a bad way, but I was prepared for there's a certain caliber when you go to a PWI. There's a certain caliber of what is that? What am I trying to say? Like the way that you're taught and it was just a different demeanor and a different cadence. And I didn't feel prepared for that. I had to fall in line, don't get me wrong.
Right.
I got a couple of C's in grad school, and that was a wake up call. And I was like, oh, we can't do the C, honey. We paying for that.
Right. 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 Right.
So yeah. So it was a great experience. I have
So, so what kind of work did you go into after grad school?
So when I was in undergrad, I was in Model UN, which was a debate team. And I was also I was a part of a lot of like clubsy things that dealt with like history, because it's like, it was called the history, political science department, history and political science. I think it was history, political science, or something else. So we always had like, there was always opportunities to learn outside the classroom. Like there was always like places you can work, like for a courthouse or things like that. And so I knew somewhere in my life law was going to be close to me. And when law school didn't work out, I kind of felt a little bummed, but I stayed in my head that I'm going to work for government. Like I'm going to work for government in some way. And when you come home from school, and I don't know if this is the same for you, but city of New York is one of the first places you look for a job, right? First place you look for a job is with the city. And my family over the years has always been like, make sure you take the test for this and make sure you take the test for that. They stay sending you stuff about taking a test to work for the city. Like, I always had this thing in my head, like, well, if you work for the city, you got to take a test. But then somebody told me, no, you can still apply for jobs, but you take tests for specialized jobs. And I was like, oh, okay. So I knew you had to take a test for sanitation. I knew you had to take a test for police department, fire department, all of those things. But there were other tests you could take too. So I sat for so many tests for the city. And I was dating this guy at the time who, and if you realize at certain schools, there's certain opportunities that are given to you. And at his school, he went to NYU. At his school, they had this job board that was just like so many jobs. Like it was so many jobs. And he would be like, yo, hey, Tanzi, I found this job. I found this job. I found that job. And he gave me like, I don't know, 10 jobs. He would always bring, and he would rip them off the bulletin board. Like, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to like, like write it down. And he would rip off the things and he sent it to me. And we saw each other one day and he gave it to me and he said, you should apply for this job. And I said, oh my God, it's with the city of New York. And it was a job working for the Equal Employment Practices Commission for the city of New York. And I said, this is amazing. Like, this is perfect. And all of the things, it was like, affirmative action work and compliance work and all of this stuff. And I was working for FIT at the time. When I came home from college, I worked for FIT and I worked for it was Orgy Cohen College. I think it's called Metropolitan College of the city now or something like that. And I was working with this group called Public Allies. And so I knew somewhere in my life it was going to be something law, politically, something related, as I wanted that. And I applied for this job. I sent my resume and I applied. I want to say it was like September. No, it was like October or something, somewhere in the fall. And I got a phone call back and it was this Black man on the other end, Abraham May Jr. I'll never forget it. And he said, I would like to talk to you. Would you come in and have an interview? And this was like my first really like big interview with the city. So I went in and well, I knew he was Black by the way he spoke. But of course, when you meet someone and they're in this executive director position, it's like okay, Black people really are in positions of power and really do make decisions. This man was the executive director. And the Equal Employment Practices Commission had been created by the Dinkins administration. Shout out to past Mayor David Dinkins, who just passed away not too long ago. And it was created to help address issues with the city of New York historically, where people were marginalized, as you know, people of color, Blacks and Hispanics, marginalized out of opportunities. It was literally a watchdog agency like
Mm,
the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission for the federal government, but on a smaller scale for the city.
mm,
And I didn't even know. Like I had to do all my little research, and the internet was just getting big then, and so back in those times, it was big, but not as big as it is now.
right.
And I was just in. I was like, this is where I should be. And so I was hired. I was hired as affirmative action auditor,
Mm,
affirmative action compliance auditor, and I audited the fire department. I audited all of these New York City agencies. And
mm,
I didn't know at the time there were over 150 mayoral city agencies. Who knew?
mhm,
So
mhm.
I was just like, oh my God, the city is like everywhere. And so all of these agencies, and they kind of mirror after federal agencies. And I knew this from being a political science student, but I just had no idea about my own city, which is crazy. So that's what I did right out of college, which was like my real big, big, big job. I worked for the city. And I stayed working for the city even after till 9/11, because I was there on 9/11. I was there. I was literally, I could see the first plane like it was crazy. So I worked for the city for about 6 years. And the last agency I worked for was actually the last agency I worked for was DCAS, but really working was sanitation. So I worked for sanitation, and right after sanitation, as you know, the city was going through crazy. Like we didn't have no money, people were being laid off left and right.
Mhm.
My job was affected, but I was eligible for rehire for anywhere. And so DCAS called me. I worked for DCAS for like 6 months, and then the federal government called me like while I was in the middle of that, because I went to this job fair. Remember job fairs? We used to have those. Went to this job fair at Baruch, and it was for public policy, for all public policy, because at that time I had my degree. I had all of this education and these degrees, and I was like, I need to be making some money. What the hell's going on here?
Right.
So I went to Baruch, and there was this booth set up for the Department of Labor, OFCCP. And I was like, oh my God, that's the federal government. Oh my God. There was also FBI was also there. It was a couple of like main ones that um, EPA was there, because people don't think that people need policy people for the Environmental Protection Agency, but we absolutely do. So, and at the time, I had a policy analysis and management master's degree. So I wanted something that was much more meaty. So I went, and this girl, Rachel, I'll never forget, her name was Rachel Torres, and she gave me her card, and we vibed because she was an Afro Latina. So we vibed heavy. And I was like, oh my God, like she was beautiful chocolate. I was like, yes, let's do it. Let's talk. So when I say it was like almost, and that was way before, right? So that was at least a year before. She was like, there's going to be jobs available. You'll be able to come in. And I was like, what? So I hadn't heard anything back. Never heard again. Never heard for a long time. And then right after, like while I was working for DCAS, in that little time in between after 9/11, when we were trying to get our lives back together and the city was rebuilding, I got a phone call from her, and she was like, are you ready? She's like, because we're ready to interview you. And I was like, for the federal government? What? So the Equal Employment Practices Commission was the best job for me, because what it did was it opened my eyes up to affirmative action
Mm,
and equal employment opportunity, which is really what the foundations of diversity, equity, and that's where it was born. And that saved my life. Like that saved my corporate life. It saved my life. And that's how I ended up in diversity. It's from then. So from 1999, I've been in diversity since before it was called diversity. And it started there. And then I worked for the federal government, and then I worked for corporate companies, and that's all the work that I did.
I really like that story, because it's foundational to where you are now. So tell us, what the heck is diversity, equity, inclusion? They got everybody going to these training programs, and
Uh,
I mean, I'm just like, I'm tired of sharing
Ah,
my story
you
as a
have
Black
to.
woman.
Well,
Like,
listen.
this ain't for me, this for you.
Right, right. Okay, all right, Tom and Brad, this is for you, and Heather, it's for you. Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, like I said, is not new to the workplace. It's been in the workplace since forever. Actually, it's been in the workplace since Kennedy signed an executive order in 1961, which required
Come
federal
on with the
contractors,
laws.
okay, which required federal contractors to complete affirmative action forms to ensure that the federal government, so if you receive, so here's how, this is the foundation to this work, right? If you were a contractor and you want to do business with the government and you had over 50 employees and you were getting a contract over $150,000, you got to fill out an affirmative action plan. And an affirmative action plan really, really solidifies that you are hiring people of all walks of life, people of color, because what it is, it's a statistical analysis. So affirmative action, as we know, is the leveling of the playing field, right? It is the goals or the whatever you want to call it that has been put into place, and it's a federal thing. But people don't know affirmative action does not, because due to federalism, which is rooted in white supremacy, does not actually exist in every single state. Let's be clear, it doesn't exist in every single state. So there are still places you can go and it can be like, nope, we don't want you here. And you don't have a footing because affirmative action doesn't apply in those particular states. And affirmative action, although it is a federal statute, it doesn't apply everywhere. So let's get into that. So if you were a contractor and you want to do business with the government, you needed to complete an affirmative action plan. That affirmative action plan would then go to the U.S. Department of Labor, OFCCP, which is the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs, which is where I worked. If your affirmative action plan came back and you had not had enough Blacks, enough Hispanics, enough women, enough any of the minority groups, Asian, whatever, veterans or people with disabilities. So it's not just Black people. Let's be clear. If you didn't have enough of those in your particular company, you were either going to be violate. You was either going to get a notice of a violation. You have to pay a fine, or you would have to you'd have to like give proof as to why you couldn't hire these particular groups of people in your workplace. So that is the foundational origins of what affirmative action, of what diversity and inclusion is. And then on top of that, every single company with of course, I'm talking about like larger companies and organizations have to fill out an equal employment opportunity form. Like, so when they say we're an EEO employer, they are required, although the person is not required to give this information, but they're required to receive whether or not, if they give you the form, if you fill it out, you fill it out. I actually suggest all Black folks fill out the form. Okay, fill out the form that's letting people know what you look like, because if you do not fill out those forms, those companies, it's going to be very, very difficult. If you want to go get a job with Verizon, I used to work for Verizon. If you want to go get a job with Verizon, let's just say, for example, you don't ever fill out those forms. Verizon would never know how many Black people it ever employed. It would never know how many women it employed. And so, or people, Hispanic, whatever you are. So it's very, very important. And so that is the foundations of what this work is. And so let me tell you. So over the years, it gradually became, oh, well, that's the diversity of an organization. That is the diversity. So it just started with the word diversity. Then it moved into diversity and inclusion. And then people started to realize, oh, great, if you have Black people in the workplace, you got women in the workplace, you got, Asian, whatever in the workplace, but then are we paying you what you need to get paid? So then equity gets layered into that. So there is a foundation to this work, because it used to just be about, are you hiring us? Now it's like, are you hiring us? Do we have a seat at the table, and are you paying us? So diversity is about who gets to be on the team. Inclusion is about who gets to play. And equity is about, are we all getting paid fairly for our roles on the team? So if you want to break it down and look at it in that way, that is what diversity, equity, and inclusion is. So diversity, equity, and inclusion was foundationally created to support what we knew affirmative action was. And then but a lot of companies didn't want to talk about affirmative action. Oh, that's scary. Nobody wants to think about it. Nobody wants to hear about that. If you look at my job sequence, you'll see how the titles have changed over the years. And called that. It was always called affirmative action or equal employee EEO person or something, or employee relations. It always sat in HR compliance. So that's really where this work came from. So with all of the injustices, I'd have to say really where it started was with the Trayvon Martin situation. I think kind of even going further, where people started to really, and don't get me wrong, Black people have been about this. We've always had the hands. We've always been about the business. We've always been about justice. If it wasn't for the civil rights movement, everybody wouldn't have their rights today. Gay rights wouldn't be in place, immigrants. So we've always been here. Black people's always been here. Hispanic people have always been here. Immigrants have always been here. Veterans have always been here. People with disabilities have always been here. Now there's an opportunity for us to actually have a voice in the workplace. But when it comes to social injustice, people bump their head and don't understand that people of color, Black people specifically, if you don't understand our timeline, then you can't understand the reasons why. You can't people don't make the connection between the officer and the overseer and the officer. People don't make the connection from the plantation to the projects. People don't make the connection from the plantation to the prison system. Or people don't understand that the three reasons why Black people have been such incited politically has been mass incarceration, white supremacy, systemic racism. Those big three things.
That's a lot. But it sounds to me that the diversity, equity, inclusion work is right here. And then there's a whole space for the anti-racism work, right? Which is now you looking at yourself and how you're going to be a better person. And that sometimes these two are merged together. And to me, from your definition, it sounds like we need to have these as two different pots.
Well, I don't know. I would say that. I would say it falls under the DE&I umbrella because what also falls under the DEI, and people don't want to associate it with diversity. They're like, oh, well, I'm not a racist and I'm not a racist. But if you don't understand the history, if you don't understand the history, the whole world was colonized. Okay. The big five colonized the whole world. So this is not just here in America.
Right.
In America right now is what we see because this is what we're exposed to. But if you go to Colombia, South America, there are anti-racism situations going on there. There are, Black people have been marginalized across the entire diaspora. It's not just here, but here is because this is where we know, this is what we know, but here's where a lot of the brutality happened, right? If you think about who colonized who, right? They say the Spanish and the Portuguese were the worst colonizers, and then came the English. And you think about where all of those places settled, that's actually a reality. That's actually a true thing. And we were actually, honestly coming here, it was colonized by the British, right? And so it became one of these things where every single thing that we do, down to I don't care what you want to call anything. I mean, professionalism, everything is rooted in white supremacy, down to where we live, down to going to the bank and getting a mortgage. It's all rooted in white supremacy. So this diversity, equity, and inclusion work is inclusive of the affirmative action stuff. It is inclusive of the EEO stuff. It is inclusive of anti-racism, because you do have to have an opportunity to look at yourself and figure yourself out. And then it's Black people that need to look at themselves as well. Don't get me wrong. Racism isn't a word that we created. Black people didn't create the word racism. Racism was created by white people. Okay? Actually, race was created by white people. Read the word caste by Isabel Wilkerson. Okay? And that will help you get an understanding about socioeconomic statuses and classes and colorism when it comes to Black people. There's a lot of books. I can give you some books, honey. I can give you some books. But White Fragility is one by Dr. Robin DiAngelo, who is about this business. Okay. This white woman is not a game. Anything by Dr. Jane Elliott, she's another ally. And so if you look at this, and if you understand the history of how Black people, where we are dispersed throughout the entire diaspora, white supremacy is everywhere. So white supremacy needs to be addressed. And that is really what looking at yourself within that anti-racism scope is all about. And I'll leave it there because it can get long.
Professor Mercer, I'm gonna have to have you back
Listen, I'm happy to come back. You can come and sit in my class anytime you want. It's all good.
because we didn't even get to the creative side.
Oh, that's my love. That's my love. So maybe I can answer that in 10 minutes, right? In 10 seconds. I don't know, a few minutes. So
2 minutes.
The creative side is never left. Like I've always been creative. Doesn't matter what I did in my life. Like even when I was working in corporate, I was straddling corporate and creative. Like I was modeling, I was a print model. I had campaigns with like Dove and Bank of America and all of these things. And as a kid, I grew up in theater, I grew up in performing arts. So I danced. I'm trained in jazz and modern dance. And I danced all over the place, danced everywhere, and always been on some stage someplace, always been, you know what I'm saying, in a 1, 2, 3, 4, and you know what I'm saying, and getting them counts down, and always in some sort of theater project or something, and even in college. So that's where I was able to feed my artsy side. I never really let it die. Even growing up as, going as an adult, I've had little side companies. I did event planning where I was able to be creative in that space. I got an event planning certification, and everything I did, I tried to make sure I kept an artsy side of me. I worked for companies where I, was a designer for people going to these white folks' houses and be like, damn, this is how y'all living out here. Y'all got everything y'all need. And then here's this Black girl coming in and designing a space for you to live in to make you feel like your house is whole and healthy and wholesome. And so I never let my creative side dampen my artsy side of my life. And I stayed very, very connected to that. And I stayed in acting classes. I stayed in dance classes. I still dance today every now and again. I'm a little rusty, but I still dance every now and again. And I've acted in many things. And I'm super grateful for my journey. I never let my artsy side die. I never did. And I think if I have any advice for anybody, you can do so many things. You don't have to choose one thing. Don't get me wrong. You need to choose a thing and be damn good at it, but put excellence into every single thing that you do. Make excellence a habit in every single thing that you do. If you're going to commit to doing this, if you're going to, and we talked about this, right? Black women, we are the most educated in the workplace now, the most educated, because we are not a monolith, and we do not all look the same, and we do not all have the same experiences. But we know one thing: we're gonna get those degrees, right? And we're gonna do what we got to do to move forward. And Black women also have the most businesses, right? Businesses in America, we're like the fastest group of people that create businesses because we're all always and have always been very creative. And whether we're making soaps and butters, or we doing tutorials, or we doing makeup tutorials or hair tutorials, and the natural hair movement and all of that, it is us feeding the very DNA about us, the creativity inside of us. Don't get me wrong, we may be smart, but we are also very, very creative people. And when I think about that as also being very double consciousness, because I know a lot of Black women, and just like yourself, this is a very artsy and creative thing, right? To have these conversations. But if somebody didn't know you, and if you were just working at your job, nobody would know anything else. Nobody would know that Ebony wears this bomb ass blue lipstick, and you know what I'm saying, and has a podcast empowering Black people and Black women and young ladies and Black kids, and nobody would know that. They would just know this is what Ebony does here in this work. You know what I'm saying? With her master's degree and what she does over here. You know what I'm saying? So for me, I love us. I love Black people. I love us. And I love Black women because we are amazing. And, even ratchet ones, we are amazing in every way. There's something beautiful and colorful and wonderful that we bring. I don't give a damn. So, and nobody can never tell me nothing different. Nobody can never tell me nothing different. And so across the diaspora, we are beautiful, amazing beings, and we can do anything, anything, anything. We can do 10 things and do all of those 10 things bomb.
Tandalea, this was amazing. How can we follow you? How can we support you? How can we connect with you?
So I'm on Instagram, Tonda3. Is all my titles up there. Professor, diversity, actor, everything. So I'm on Instagram, on LinkedIn. My government is Tandalea Mercer, my government. And so yeah, you can follow me those. I mean, I don't ever get on Twitter very much. I'm not on Facebook very much. So don't worry about those. I think we can stay with, like, if it wants to be fun, Instagram is cool. If you want it to be, very professional, LinkedIn is good. So there we have it.
Tandalea, this was awesome. This was amazing. You took us to class.
Okay.
I appreciate all of this goodness.
I hope I didn't bore you with that. I'm sorry.
No, it was the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank you for this platform. Information is key. Education is key. It's the cornerstone. Let's get it. Let's just keep doing it.
Thank you so much, Tandalea. So some takeaways are: there's no need to code switch at a HBCU. Show up as you are. 2, diversity is who gets to be on the team. Inclusion is who gets to play on the team. And equity is everyone on the team being paid fairly for their role. And 3, we can do many things. We don't have to choose one thing, but be sure to put excellence in whatever you commit to. Thank you, Tandalea, and welcome to the Liberated Success family. Thank you so much for watching and listening all the way to the end. If you found our work impactful, informative, and important, show us some love with a donation. Donation links are in my bio on IG, Twitter, and YouTube. On Facebook, it's the first comment. And if you're listening on the podcast, you can make a donation via listener support. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, to the podcast. Follow us on IG, Facebook, and Twitter. All right, wear your mask. Even if you're vaccinated, you need to wear your mask. Wash your hands, physically distance, get your vaccination, and all Black Lives Matter. I will see you again whenever it drops. See, if you're subscribed, you'll know when it's coming. All right, take it easy. Bye.
One whole day